25% tariffs that the president announced on imported cars as well as parts starting next week, threatening larger tariffs if the EU and Canada team up against the U.S. Joining us now, Evercore ISI public policy chief strategist Sarah Bianchi. Market was down, at least the NASDAQ got hit hard yesterday, but it's up today. Sarah, was it late in the day when we got this word, or was it in line with what everyone was expecting about the auto sector?
There certainly was an expectation that Trump would hit the auto sector, and 25% seems to be the number that he likes, directionally speaking, but in particular in this space. So I think I guess the market took it in line. Certainly a lot of scrambling for those who follow this sector closely to see really who is hit and how everybody's supply chain looks. Certainly different impacts throughout this sector that we expect, if it stays intact, will be very, very disruptive. Maybe some of the comments about the big day, Liberation Day, which is April 2nd or 3rd or whenever it is next week, there were some posturing about what is actually going to happen then. And I think you have a better idea of what we might see, but there's still quite a bit of uncertainty about how it plays out. What are you expecting? Well, anyone who's served in White Houses, and I've been in 3, knows that next Tuesday is still a long way off in terms of dotting the I's and crossing the T's. As you note, the president did say yesterday that perhaps some would be pleasantly surprised. The reality is you can back into really what any number the White House really wants to do if you're counting not only the reciprocal rate, but also non-tariff barriers, currency, and other factors. So it's really up to them to come up with a number here that they can justify. But certainly the expectations are that the EU is particularly in the crosshairs. In addition, India. But we'll have to see. I think really what the market would like right now is just some certainty about how to price all of this, and the notion that at some point maybe we'll stop with these announcements. Will there be phone calls going back and forth in the next week that could change what finally happens? Is there any way you could see some countries try to either dampen the impact or making promises about what they're willing to do at some point so that they're not in the crosshairs? Certainly, you've seen a lot of trips to Washington, a lot of reports on that. I expect that those will continue. In some cases, it's harder for a country or to make an offer. India, for example, there's just a lot of ag tariffs and other things that they would have to get their head around. That's pretty complicated to do. Perhaps some of the smaller ASEAN countries might be able to figure that out. But I don't have huge expectations that there's going to be a lot of pre-negotiated relief. There still is some policy questions that the Trump administration itself will have to figure out in terms of, do these start exactly day one? And again, how do they back into these calculations? And then really the key question is all of this stacked? So do you pay the steel and aluminum plus your reciprocal plus your auto? That's where it really, really can start to add up in terms of the macro tariff rate on these countries. What about oil in Venezuela? That could have ripple effects. And I don't know whether the administration really wants to see higher oil prices or higher prices across the board. They may say that we need to recalibrate, and we're willing, we've sacrificed a lot of job losses to have lower prices, and that's coming to an end. But I don't know if you saw J.D. Vance on that Signal conversation, immediately said, I'm worried about a spike in oil prices that could happen from this. So that's in the back of their mind. What's going to happen in that sector? Yeah, so it was interesting to see the president. This notion of secondary tariffs is not something we have seen. And again, it I think really what the market wants here is just some certainty. So if we start to see that as a general tool, that certainly is not going to help with certainty. Venezuela itself, certainly a big story for China, a big importer there, as well as the EU, of course, traditionally the United States as well. So they're going to have to figure out how they want to calibrate that. Many of these countries don't rely on Venezuela for a huge percentage, so perhaps they can navigate around this some. But yes, with all of these tariffs, Canada, Venezuela, all of these places that at some point you do need to worry about oil prices. And as you noted, that's long something this president has said he wants to get down, certainly not the reverse.
People say the snap election in Canada was brought about by the tariff threats, and I guess the notion is that it's helped Carney. Do you have a feeling on what happens there? Are suddenly the liberals they snatched victory from the jaws of defeat at this point? Well, what's going to happen up there?
It sounds like that. Right now, I'm not a Canadian political expert, but it does seem that certainly Carney has come out and risen up so far due to these tariffs and the general posture around Canada, the notion that potentially it could be a 51st state. I think they have found a lot of fire in the belly in terms of how they want to respond.
I don't understand that, Sarah. I don't know whether I believe it or not. I don't know. Republicans would never win the House again. You can just forget about that. I don't know how many representatives that state would have, but they'd all vote Democrat. So
yeah, it's definitely not the best path to get to 270 if you're a Republican candidate.
Massachusetts or Vermont and Minnesota on steroids. Stay up there.
Exactly.
I like Canada, but very liberal.
Yeah, no, look, you're seeing a lot of parts of the world respond to the president, right? I mean, just the action, the fiscal action in Germany as a response. So this is coming fast and furious, and different countries are responding differently. Certainly the best way, if you were simply negotiating with Donald Trump on tariffs, would not be to fight back and to take a more muted approach, as we've seen with China and Mexico. But there's politics involved. And so some of these countries are just going to get some fight in them.